So what I have failed to do completely, of course, is introduce myself. My name is Amber. I'm the founder of the Extreme Hangout, and it really is super fun because this is the first panel that I've been a part of since I've got to COP. So I'm delighted to be here. And for me, this talk is particularly emotive because my father was a great inspiration to me. And it's really why I'm here today. It's why the Extreme Hangout came about. He lived in the Bahamas for the majority of the last 30 years of his life and adored exploring the depths of the ocean. And it was his experiences of life in the Bahamas, of watching our coral reef die, of seeing more litter washing up, of understanding the impacts of tourism on the lifestyles of the Bahamian people. And that was what made him get involved. And he was a prolific letter writer, as I'm sure you can well imagine. India knew my father. And he started writing to newspapers and radio stations. And indeed, the prime minister of the country at the time, I think, was rather vexed the number of letters he would receive from my dad. And Papa's work grew. In fact, indeed, he was invited by the United Nations to become their first representative for the oceans. And he said no, because he knew he could have more effect continuing his work in the Bahamas. And so it was my pride in what he did. And we sadly lost him to cancer in 2007. But I sort of looked around the rest of my family and didn't see anyone else was going to leap into his shoes. So I kind of thought, there's a gap in the market. I'm going to leap in. But he was a fun guy. He was passionate about education and about the next generation. So that's really why this panel discussion has come about. And I love the fact that we have found, really without any difficulty at all, more sort of parent and children dynamics here at COP, inspiring each other. And India, should we start with you?
I like that you call Conrad a child.
Tiny child.
Yes,
no,
tiny
not
child.
at all. Grown young man.
There you go. Thank
Conrad,
you.
we're very pleased to have you here as well.
My tiny child is
Thank
here
you.
with me.
And you're a tiny child that you take on quite some adventures with you.
Yes, well, he with me too. I'm the mother of 5 children. We have our eldest is adopted Bahamian son, who I feel has been the light and life of my life, and has changed our family dynamic dramatically. But quite apart from that, it's also been having 4 boys that changed my life dramatically, and 1 girl finally at the end. But these boys have pushed me to be a different person, I think, and I found that very exciting. So it's not always me dragging Conrad, it's often the other way around. But I'm lucky in the fact that we live on a tiny island, a barrier island in the Bahamas. It's only 3 miles long and half a mile wide. Conrad spent his life growing up there, and for 30 years I've lived there, and that, I think, has informed my life to be very different and very unexpected to the life that perhaps I was meant to have. And when I looked at your wheel, actually, my bits sort of shifted around because of the geography of where I lived. So in fact, we live as a minority on that island. And so we've had quite a different perspective on that wheel of life. However, I have come from great privilege, and I never take that for granted. And I hope that my children also feel the same way. Living on an island where you are the minority, you do see a different way of life, which is important as well. But yes, we're definitely adventurers. And I'm sure we'll get to the fact that we work in Ukraine quite a lot, which is always an interesting topic of conversation.
Well, that's what I was going to come to next, Conrad.
Yeah.
So you are at university at the moment, at Newcastle.
1 year left.
1 year left. Obviously not quite at Newcastle at the moment because you're sitting here with us in Baku, but I'm sure Newcastle are incredibly proud of the fact that you are here with us.
I would hope so, yeah.
Now, Conrad, tell me, okay, so life growing up in the Bahamas, I had that privilege too. Yeah. I know how fabulous and fun it is. I'm sure that's inspired you in many ways as well. But I'd love to know, in fact, how that has shaped your outlook. Then, of course, you've gone to school and on to university in the UK. And then I'd like to know about how you've ended up on your journeys with your mother, going to the Ukraine, and what kick-started that.
Well, starting out, so as Mum said, we grew up in the Bahamas with my 3 older brothers and my little sister. She came along at some point. Yeah, we spent a lot of time outside, obviously, but extremely grateful, very lucky to be able to have that luxury. So nature and being outside has been a big part of my growing up, and I guess who I've become now as a young man, or a little boy, as my mum would like to point out. But definitely, I mean, I went over to boarding school at 7 to the UK, and it was a big change, lifestyle, and also just daily kind of interactions with people and the world around you, a very different environment. But the Ukraine thing is much more Mum's doing. She started working with an amazing charity called organization called Global Empowerment Mission.
That started when Hurricane Dorian came through the Bahamas.
Right, exactly.
And did you get involved in the relief and clear up then, or were you not?
I wish I had the opportunity. I was actually at school at the time, but both my brothers, all three of my brothers actually, and my little sister were definitely involved, helping with people who are displaced, coming to the islands. Obviously, the Bahamas is an archipelago, so it's 700 different islands. And, you know, you have a lot of displaced people after something like Hurricane Dorian, after such a big event. And so they were helping, kind of trying to do little bits, but Mum really spearheaded it. And as I'm sure we'll get onto, led by example, and started working with this charity, and suddenly found this connection to Ukraine. And she's been out there probably 8 or 10 times. And I'm fortunate enough to have gone out there. I'm coming up to my third one. We'll go in 2 weeks. So for our third trip out there.
And it's going to be getting pretty cold out there now, isn't it?
Yeah, I've been every time in January, 2 years back to back. We went in January, which is just as the cold is starting to come in. And it changes massively. My brother's been out in the summertime where it's, you know, it's just like England. It's beautiful, it's warm, it's green. But in the winter, it can get really, really freezing cold, and the conditions become quite harsh.
And we're talking about war zone. We're talking about right out in where the activity is happening, where the Russians are invading. So Conrad's being discreet, underplaying it, but he is right there on the front line. Yeah.
We're going to come back and hear more about this story in a minute. But now I would like to move over to our other family on stage, which is wonderful. Prasidi, you have a wonderful, strong and brilliantly youthful voice. You're from the southern part of India. You're doing a lot of work in the forestry and forest management space. Please tell us a little bit about this. I know you've just published a book as well.
Yes. Well, hello everyone. I am Prasidi. I'm from India. I am 12 years old. I am the founder of Prasidi Forest Foundation and the Green Pillar. Prasidi Forest Foundation is a non-profit organization that focuses on nature-based solution projects such as indigenous tree plantation, lake restoration, agroforestry, mangrove plantation, and community projects to revitalize rural communities in vulnerable spaces. I have planted 150,000 trees till now and done this in more than 107 different locations. Besides that, I am the founder of the Green Pillar, which is a social enterprise that was founded under G20 when India had the presidency, in which we provide climate education courses to young people about climate literacy and environment. This year, my foundation, Prasidi Forest Foundation, also got accredited from United Nations, and we have a beautiful delegation from around the world who represent the voice of youth, young people, experts, professionals in the climate space. I've been doing this since the age of 4. So it's been more than 8 years now being in this climate space. I was there at COP last year as well in UAE, in Dubai. And I had the pleasure of being alongside our United Nations General Assembly President as one of the keynote speakers for UNDESA and also in UNFCCC. And this year, my focus has been about promoting child voices and how we have a role to play, young voices, and how we have a role to play a potential, and also showcasing the grassroots level. Because I think in global conferences like these, we can speak in conference rooms, but the real impact is when we actually go on ground and see what is happening. Because facing these climate crises, seeing all these impacts and understanding that in 2100 all rainforests will be gone, or that by 2040, 1 in 4 children will be living in areas with extreme water shortage, I realized the importance of taking real-time action. And that is pretty much how things have flown for me, and yes.
So, Prasiddhi, from the age of 4, what made 4-year-old you stand up and go, I need to get involved in this? Was it a particular experience, or was it maybe something your parents said, or?
Well, much like Conrad, is that right?
Yeah.
Much like how you said you've been connected with nature, it's been a similar case with me. From a very young age, I'm still young, but even before I could walk or talk, admiring the rustling of bees, the buzzing of bees and trees. It's been so amazing for me. Learning from the tiniest of things, admiring them, learning from them, treating them like my friends. But then at the age of 4, in 2016, when Varda cyclone hit the shore of Tamil Nadu. So I live in Tamil Nadu, that is in India, in Asia. And with a coastline of 1,076 kilometers, we are always prone to floods and cyclones and things like that. In fact, there's a saying in Tamil Nadu that is in monsoon, water scares the city, and in summer there is water scarcity. That is practically the situation over there. But then in 2016, when Varda cyclone hit the shore, I was so disheartened because treating trees like my friends and watching them get uprooted, road flooded, I felt I want to do something for them. But I also realized at that point of time that somehow alone it is just by crying or staying angry, I cannot make a difference. So I started participating in tree plantation drives, and my parents have had a contribution in that by understanding what I want to do and going with me and taking me over there, and never saying no, to all the ideas I come up with. I come up with very imaginative, creative, impactful ideas that can be huge, but definitely not unachievable. And from there it started. I participated, learned about indigenous tree plantation, not doing monoculture, connected with experts, farmers, villagers, all kinds of people. And then at the age of 6 in 2018, I was like, I want to do something of my own. I want to create my own forest, make my own impact. And I suddenly said in the tree plantation, I want to plant 100,000 trees. So I said this, I was only 6, and there was this person beside me.
I'm not sure I knew the number 100,000 when I was 6.
That's what happened.
Incredible.
That's what happened. This person came to me and he's like, Prasiddhi, do you even know how many zeros are there in 100,000? And you were like, I want to plant 100,000 trees. And definitely I told him.
Father.
I was going to say, Praveen, you taught her almost too well, probably.
I told him how many zeros are there, and I told him that it was my imagination. You know how a small candle can light up the room? Similarly, I also want to make a difference. And from there, it gradually started and happened.
Praveen, what did you feed her, first of all? And does she scare you sometimes?
Yeah. Every morning when she wakes up, I am there with her, and then I'm like, what will be on her agenda list today? and then she blocks my calendar very smartly. She has access to all my IDs. She blocks my calendar, and Saturday, Sunday is gone out of my life. There is no more Saturday, Sunday for me. It's like you have to go. This is the GPS location. You have to drive me there. So my role, and then she has certain count. So you have to click a pictures for me. You have to take me there safely. You have to take care of me there, and keep a watch on me. Keep and watch on me. That's all. Because the language what she talks to the rural people over there, I don't know that language. So one day
It's literally a different language.
Tamil. She learned the language.
Wow.
And one day I was sitting in my car, and then few of the people came running to me and they asked me, "Sir, can I have your number, please?" I said, "What happened?" But I was in English and they were in Tamil, so I gave my numbers, and then we were coming back. I asked her, "What happened?" Suddenly all of them came and asked. So I met the few. She had an initiative of planting 5 fruit trees in a very indigenous people, or I say below poverty line people, that they can take the fruits from the trees, like a coconut tree, a mango tree, a lemon tree, banana tree, and they can pluck it in case of situation when they don't have food or something. And among them, one of the family said that my kid want to go to school, and I don't have money for it. Then she said, if your kids score more than 60%, I will provide her scholarship or him scholarship. You can take my number. Then they asked, where you can take the number from him. And everyone came, and you won't believe, she provided scholarship to one of the kids, and she's doing really great. So that's how she is spontaneous and always on flow.
Doesn't this just show you that intergenerational inspiration just goes both ways?
Well, it's interesting. When I hear Didi talk, you know, it's unbelievably impressive. And of course,
Thank you
Conrad
so
turned
much.
to me and said, what are we doing here? Because she's outstanding, really outstanding. But what it makes me think is that I grew up very, very differently, but I grew up with a mother and grandparents who happened to be the last Viceroy of India, but with the idea that duty and service is something that we needed to take on. We needed to earn our place in life, because to those who have been given much, much is expected. And so I've always felt that I need to give back because I was born into this very lucky life. So yours is an embedded passion. Yours you were born with. You didn't learn it. It's natural within you, and that is really remarkable.
Thank you so much. You know what you said about grandparents? I actually correlate with that, because personally I have been so inspired from my grandparents. In my case, it goes 3 generations, me, my dad, and then them, because learning from him, learning from his experiences. And I think that's the important part of having a family, right? You get experience from them and energy from you. It just makes a beautiful mix.
I couldn't agree with you more. One of another very British thing is Sunday lunch. Sunday lunch in the UK is sacrosanct. Nobody messes with Sunday lunch. And I think the reason it's always been my favorite is because it's so intergenerational. And you've got little babies in high chairs all the way through to the grandparents, usually a few waifs and strays who've wandered in as well, and they get to come to the table too. And that was really formative in my life, of being allowed to speak to older generations. And you felt very much that we were all around that same table together, and so there was no hierarchy. And you could express your views or concerns, and people would hear you at that table. And I always thought that was a very special thing, because today, with climate in particular, we all need to be brave and stand up and find our voices. But if that's not a platform that's ever been given to you naturally, even in a household setting, it makes it increasingly difficult to find your voice, perhaps, and to stand up. So that's for sure, obviously, something that parents can give.
I'm interested in that, and yesterday we touched on this as well, because I think this generation are much more clued into it. And he is often, obviously exhausted by my inability to even manage my telephone. But is she driving you? Clearly she's driving you. But are your eyes more opened by her experiences? Because mine are by their generation. I'm much more aware of climate through my children. And of course it should be the reverse, but I think I'm just too old that climate is much more their conversation, and I'm learning it from them.
So as you mentioned, there was a Varda cyclone and there was a tea plantation drive. It all started from a small tree, or I'll say a sapling. I was also not aware that she is going to take me over here during course of time. I was like, just a small saplings, okay, let's go ahead and do it, no problem. Then it happened on a day, then it happened on weeks, and it happens on months, and then I and her mother were standing there, and in front of a huge crowd, after a massive tree plantation, they were asking, okay, Prasiddhi, tomorrow the tree plantation is going to get over. What will you do now? And then she said, I will have my own plantation of 1 lakh trees. And then I and my wife was looking each other face, what is she speaking? And then she was looking, okay, I was also like, okay. And that gentleman asked, do you even know how many zeros are there in 1 lakh? And I was like, now she's got. Now let me see. And then when she replied, there are this many zeros and all, I said, no, she is sure. So if she is damn sure, then we have to do something. I mean, we have to be with her. And that started there. And then it keeps on going. So it was not a sudden exposure for me into it, but she slowly inspired me. She slowly brought me into it, because my profession is engineering, designing, and everything what we all do in our generation, in our age. But then I found out that there are a lot of people who are into this, and they connect with each other. COP is one of such things where they connect with each other. There are a lot of people who want to save their planet, who wants to work together. And that's how I'm there with her.
And that's what's brilliant about Extreme Hangout. And I love the fact that obviously, we're in the green zone, which is so much cooler than the blue zone, I've discovered. But the blue zone is very, very serious. And I love the fact that here there's an energy to it, and that you are focusing on 18 plus, 18 to 30-year-olds, or whatever it is. I think that's really, really important. So important.
I would also like to point out, I think it's, I think you're not being kind to yourself. I'm the exact same. My mum is an amazing leader, and when she started working with this organization that she's now heavily involved in, it really started on our home doorstep. A huge hurricane came in, and she took the initiative to try and make a difference and make that step. And throughout the years, it's become more and more, and I did my first mission with them out in the Bahamas, where we went out to a school and gave out laptops after Hurricane Dorian, so that kids could get back into online learning, get back into school and have something to do. And now I'm sat here probably 5 or 6 years down the line. I've done multiple trips out to Ukraine. We did a trip out to Morocco, and it's all extremely inspiring and life-changing.
After the earthquake, wasn't it?
Exactly, after the earthquake. And I owe it all to Mum for leading by example. And wherever that takes me is next. But I guess, as you were saying, it starts with that first step, that first little initiative.
Yeah. I believe what at the end it's all about being kind, honestly kind. That's all, and that's we have forgotten it in our race to the professional world. Everything is what is our. So I've seen her. In fact, yesterday night I'll narrate a story. From here she had a panel discussion in Youth Pavilion, and then we reached around 10:30 in the what was the street, Nizami Street, and then we were walking to our hotel, and then there were two young old ladies, maybe 60s, 70s or 80s, and she was from Africa, and they lost their way to their apartment, and they just saw our badge and COP.
The battery was also dead.
And I did not understand her language, but she was able to connect with her, and she was like, they have lost their way. And then when she asked the address, the phone was dead. So they don't have address, and every day the cab used to pick her and drop her. This time they had a late dinner, so the cab dropped somewhere, and they said that this is your hotel. It was not her hotel. She said, Dada, we need to help her. I said, how? Let's charge her phone. So we went to a hotel, got the charger, charged her, then got the address, walked her to her apartment, and they were like, thank you so much. That's the kindness we need to do.
That's a great example of using technology to the best of.
But it's also an example of how she's magnetically drawn to people in need.
Yeah. That's what
amazing.
is required.
And Praveen, I think you're 100% right as well. Our generation was very much about step onto the corporate ladder, how far up can you go, and it's about, in your case, designing, engineering, manufacturing, how many products can we sell, how much can we get out of the door. And there does seem to be this re-evaluation of values, which is sort of, I think it's sneaking up on our generation slightly. And I witness it with my stepchildren as well. They inspire me regularly to think outside of the box a bit.
Yes.
And on the flip side of that, too, to go back to my dad for a second, you can tell, very proud daughter. When he was being treated for his cancer in New York, he said to me one day, he said, have you been to the new Apple store? I was there with him. And I was like, no, really doesn't interest me at all. That was it. I got marched down Madison Avenue to the new Apple store to go there, and he's like, don't you ever tell me that you're not interested in new innovations and what is happening next. You've got to stay on it. And that has really, I'm still really terrible in technology, but it does make me sit down and read stuff about AI, which I'm not naturally drawn to at all. But I've constantly got that conversation.
And I think that is something that is, again, a conversation that I'm far removed from, but an important conversation. I was asking for his younger sister to come with me out of school next week for a project I'm doing, and the headmaster of the school said, absolutely, she can go with you, because actually a world of learning outside of the school is so important at the moment. Empathy, curiosity, because AI is going to remove so many of those jobs that we all knew and understood, and which were available. They will go. So to have a new world where kids are learning about empathy, helping women find their hotels late at night, is going to be critically important as AI increasingly comes in and suffocates the world that we knew.
Maybe it will suffocate lights that perhaps we don't need so much. Are human beings really put on this planet just to work? Perhaps there are other things that we can do, other ways that we contribute. And I think certainly looking after each other and society more broadly. And Conrad and Prasidi, I would love to hear from both of you guys as well with regards to tokenism. There's always a threat of that, particularly at these large global conferences, that young people are invited to be part of it, but are you being invited onto a stage to talk about an agenda which has already been set for you? Are you allowed to be part of that planning process? And then what happens when you get back home, back to school, back to or into a job role of any sort, whether it's a voluntary one or I know you've been doing work experience on that too. Do you feel like you're able to have an authentic voice when it comes to decision making, or do you feel that it's still a little bit tokenistic? And what can the older generations do to help you feel like you genuinely, we are valuing your voices at the table?
Well, I'll just say quickly, coming back to earlier what we were saying, I think as you were pointing out, it is tough. Sometimes you do feel as a younger generation, you aren't the one that's in the big seat making the decisions or this, that, and the rest. But it's important to know that actually, maybe you're not right now, but in 5-10 years you will be. This world, the people that run it now, or the people who are in charge, will be us in the next generation, in the next coming years. And so at times, you're right, it is tough, and you do feel, oh, you're not being heard, but I do think that comes back to individuals. It comes back to having a mother or a father who let you follow that inspiration and let you ask those questions or explore your own interests. And I think that's really important. So I think it's very situational. It's not clear cut.
I think I agree that it's like a midway line, no man's land. But what is also there is, I mean, if I interpret your question rightly, you want to understand if our voices are being heard, or
I think there are definitely youth voices being heard. I mean, we've all seen what happened when young people took to the streets and did beautiful artwork on placards and absolutely made their voices heard. And there has been some response to that. But there's the risk that some of that response is tokenistic, of course. I've really been able to celebrate the last 4 years, what we're doing here at the Extreme Hangout, but of course we see young voices in the Blue Zone on a regular basis. Fantastic. But I am aware also that I sometimes have a conversation with young people here who are sort of sitting slightly slumped in their chairs, feeling rather demoralized because they're like, well, they invited us onto the stage and we were allowed to speak for a moment, but then they felt like they've been rather talked over and their ideas somewhat dismissed.
I see.
And I think a lot of what it's about is we've all got a unique lens, a unique perspective that we bring to stuff.
I get what you're saying, feeling unheard. But I think that is there. I think demoralization, you say, is something that does come with everything. I don't think it's just age limited. But if we talk in that sort of a sense, because for me, it has been there on every step. You know, how my journey started, I mentioned to you, but when I said I wanted to plant 1 lakh trees, things didn't just come suddenly to me. So I was like, where to plant, what to plant, you know, who will look after it. And the best idea that came to my mind was doing it in rural schools, because over there children can learn about the environment, as well as I can do the plantation and they can look after it and do some real impact. But just imagine a 6-year-old girl going to principals and headmasters and different people and telling them that, hey, I want to do a tree plantation, that to a fruit tree plantation. It will have no sort of income for you. And I want your land to do that for the students. Everyone appreciated it, but no one really turned back and was like, okay, come on, you can take a try, because I think that it is right for them to be hesitant. You can't just believe on a 6-year-old girl all of a sudden. But I believed in myself. I think that is so important, especially in this time, believing in ourselves, because also with the new term of climate anxiety that is becoming extremely popular, where you are becoming anxious about your future, you're becoming anxious about your opinions being heard or understood, or things like that. It is very important that we trust first in ourselves that our voices are being heard, our actions matter. And then things start going the other way around. Because in my case, what happened, everyone thinks that we need to demand to global leaders to take action. But I said that demanding is one aspect. I decided I want to take action myself. And when I take action, if a 12-year-old girl can do it, if you support us, the impact can be amplified and taken to practically the next level. That is what struck in my mind, and that is how things started to move forward. And I have a message for everyone, that is 3 things that I like to tell everywhere when it comes to things like demoralization or climate anxiety, not feeling unheard. 3 things that we really need to keep if we want a better future. You know, because we will be there in the future. We have a future ahead. We need to manage things. Right? You can support us, you can help us, but we really need to learn to look after us and our planet. And 3 things that are important is a sense of hope, a sense of reality, and a sense of responsibility. I think that is incredibly important, because today, as we face this Anthropocene with 3 central challenges of mitigating biodiversity, mitigating climate change, supporting biodiversity, and ensuring human well-being, we really need to work together and have a sense of hope and also reality. But these 2 are not going to suffice until we take some real responsibility. I think this is incredibly vital in the situations that we have.
And the way you say it is very impactful. And I was
Thank you so much.
I mean, really impactful, and that's why having you here on the stage is so important with the Greta Thunbergs, of course. But hope is something that we talk about a lot, because when we work out in Ukraine, I was part of a group that started a food bank during the pandemic. We live on an island that relies totally on tourism. And when that shut off for nearly 2 years in the Bahamas, there was a lot of food insecurities. We started a food bank. Conrad was very involved in the physical side of delivering this. 3,000 families we supplied food to every single week. We thought it would be a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. It turned into 2 years. And we learned as we go, and we had a small group who brought special skill sets in. But we were delivering hope, essentially. And what we do in Ukraine, when we go out there, especially where there's a bigger picture of what we're doing in Ukraine. But there's also the immediate need of giving these family necessity kits, in which we have clean water, a battery pack, food for a month, warm clothing, whatever they need, we take out there. And it's very short term. We also have long-term plans. But I mean, I think you should talk about when we go down into those bunkers where people are living, how it feels that we bring them home.
Yeah, completely. And I'm sure, as you said, you know, it can feel like the whole world is falling apart, and even just in our lives. And I guess it puts into perspective, you know, I was so lucky to be able to go to these places, and you go down into these bunkers and you have these grandmothers and people who are living in the basements of their homes out of fear for their lives, and they have no running water, they barely have any electricity or light. And we turn up in our full body kit, helmets, armor, and they're kind of down there in their pajamas, and it's normal life for them, and it really puts into perspective just how much life can change whilst you're still all living on the same earth. And these people are desperate, and we go out and we give them our boxes of food, and not only does it make me feel extremely lucky and grateful to not only live the life and have the life I have, but also to be able to experience it and feel like I'm making a difference. But for them, it reminds them, one, that they're not forgotten, which I think is the most important part, but also two, that people still care. And I think it's important, especially, I'm already learning so much just from hearing you talk in these last few minutes. It's important to care. And it's important for young people to care about the world. And if you do feel you're being dismissed, or you do feel that people aren't, you are spoken. People aren't actually listening. They kind of just want to hear you speak for the sake of it. They don't really care. If you do feel like that, keep going, because there will be someone. There are individuals who will listen. There are individuals who will actually pick up on your initiatives and support you and lead you places and take you places.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what you're saying, that we really need to keep going, even though we feel like we are being unheard or not understood. In fact, in my case, I've always kept a margin of 1%. I go to 100 people and I expect 1% to turn up. Even if that doesn't happen, no problem. But the important part is they're taking the effort to listen to you. That is important. You and your opinions are being registered in their mind. Later on, when you work on a transformation, it shouldn't happen that they are not joining you. Then it will come to their mind and they will come back and join your journey. They will realize how important it is to be a part of something. And another point I would like to add on is that in these times, it's important that young people and all kinds of people collaborate together and stay together. Because alone, it can be a lot more challenging than it can be when we are together and working on more projects together, collaborating, because that way the impact can be amplified on a much larger scale.
And you can talk about global empowerment, smart partnerships.
Right. Well, I also wanted to say, I read something, or I actually heard someone on a podcast the other day, and it really stuck out to me. It was, they said that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And it was this whole thing about how some people just aren't ready to take that initiative. And, whether it's a younger generation speaking to the older generation, they might not be ready to listen. The student is not ready for the teacher's lesson. And I'm sure, as you'd agree with your 1%, it's not for us to sit there for hours trying to listen. It's, just keep going. Just keep going, because they will hear, and I guess in the end you will make a difference, I'm sure.
And it really resonates with me. But also, I found learning at school very difficult. Having somebody standing out there telling you, you've got to do your French verbs.
Well, just quickly on partnerships, and I can see Adam signaling you there, but on partnerships, I think that was a really important word. And with Global Empowerment Mission, one of the things that we've realized is that when we align ourselves with other agencies, we can be much more nimble and efficient and effective. A very good example, which I gave yesterday, was after the hurricane in the Bahamas, a devastating monster hurricane wiped out, obliterated 2 islands on either side of us. The amount of plastic in our beautiful turquoise waters, the amount of plastic coming in with the aid was worse than before. We engaged, firstly, a partnership with For Hope, who take the plastic away and recycle it back in America, but we also employed all the kids who were not able to get back into school to go around picking up the plastic. 500 bags, 80-gallon bags of plastic were picked up by kids. They were paid for it. It was then taken off the island by For Hope. Brilliant. So Global Empowerment Mission headed it up, but engaged with For Hope. And a smart partnership like that made it a very effective program.
I think that is so right, of bringing people on all levels together and making a 360-degree difference, because being the child ambassador for Green Tamil Nadu mission, that is a flagship mission in my state, over there, I have this initiative called Green Brigade Program, in which in 200 plus rural schools of Tamil Nadu, I'm giving a free fruit sapling to each and every child, and also giving them climate literacy workshops in their language, and doing different creative activities with them to learn about the environment, planting a mini forest, and that is all indigenous native trees, and also planting banyan trees. Have you heard of banyan trees?
Yes, we have them in the Bahamas.
We have them a lot in the Bahamas.
Lovely. So, these lots of people don't know about it, that's why. So these trees, which are so important for biodiversity, they create an ecosystem, because coming from a place like India that is so rich in heritage, we've always had this concept of Gurukulam, in which previously, in the previous eras, where there would be a guru who would sit and all the children would sit below the banyan tree. So I'm trying to bring back that culture, because I think it's about two things now, speaking of intergenerational change, that is renewal and also revival. These are two incredibly important things, because what I've realized is, speaking of revival, that everything is there in our culture. It has always been there when we learn from our grandparents and elder generation of carrying their own food, carrying their own water. I heard from my mother about her grandmother, that she wouldn't eat anything from outside, carry her own bottle and her own food. And that is sustainability. Sustainability isn't new. It's been there. We've just forgotten it. And we really need to bring that back. And when it comes to renewal, I think sometimes in generation, we have, it shouldn't just be about legacy. It should be about adding new things to it. Something that I've also tried to do, like he mentioned, rather than using Saturdays and Sundays for fun, we like to do impactful projects and also spend some family time. So things like that, where you are able to work on both sides of bringing back the culture and also adding new elements to it, is so important.
Well, I was going to see if we had any questions in the audience, but we've got time for that. Has anybody got any questions they would like to? And we've covered so much up here already. I think I'm not surprised if the audience slightly stunned into silence at the moment, because it's been incredibly impressive listening to this. I think if there's one thing certainly for our older generations to take away, is that it is cool to care. Young people are definitely showing us that. I think we've spent far too much time perhaps living in our heads, thinking about our careers and stuff. And maybe this younger generation have taken that moment to slow us all down a little bit and show us that it is so easy and essential that we actually, whether it's through family time, through time in nature as well, have that reconnection again. And with that care comes the ability to hope, because if you don't care about something, you can't perhaps reimagine it. And when you can reimagine something, you've got hope for it and you've got aspiration perhaps to drive that. Then, of course, together, collaboratively, we can come up with the action, which is what is so critically important and absolutely vital here today, not just at COP29, but for the wider world to come and get involved in this stuff too. You guys, all four of you, have been an enormous inspiration here on the Extreme Hangout stage. Thank you so much for your time and your efforts from traveling so far away to be here. Please, everybody put their hands together. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.